Have you ever tuned into a hockey game expecting nothing more than bone-crunching checks, graceful skating, and that electric roar of the crowd, only to witness something so horrifying it's burned into your memory forever? Now, imagine that scene frozen in time. It's the late 1980s. Hockey arenas are brimming with die-hard fans. The boards are rattling with every hit, and the goaltenders, those masked warriors, are at constant risk from flying pucks and skates as sharp as razors. In one fateful collision, an athlete named Clint Malarchuk would become the central figure in what is still considered one of the most nightmarish accidents ever caught on camera in professional sports. Yet, to reduce Clint's story to that single moment is to overlook the decades of gritty determination, battles with personal demons, and an unwavering passion for hockey that defined his entire journey. So, let's unravel the full, unfiltered saga of Clint Malarchuk, from frozen ponds in rural Canada, through a solid NHL career with several teams, to that notorious life-threatening injury and beyond. Born on May 1st, 1961, in Grande Prairie, Alberta, Clint grew up in an environment that seemed, at first glance, almost idyllic for a future hockey player. Grande Prairie, located in northwestern Alberta, is no metropolis. In the 1960s, it was a modest but vibrant community. Winters arrived early and stayed late, blanketing the region with the kind of snow and ice that Canadian kids dream about. Everywhere you looked, someone was organizing a pickup hockey match on a frozen pond or in a backyard rink. When Clint was just a toddler, he was already lacing up tiny skates, wobbling around on the ice with a hockey stick half as tall as he was, determined to learn the sport that so many Canadians love as fiercely as a national religion. For Clint, these early forays into hockey weren't just leisure, they were an escape. Growing up, he faced turbulence at home. His father battled alcoholism, which created an undercurrent of stress that never quite relented. Even in his earliest memories, Clint recalls feeling on edge, never fully sure when his father's mood might shift. Hockey then became more than a pastime. It was his refuge. On the ice, the chaotic energy of home life melted away. He had a singular mission: stop the puck, and he discovered he had a knack for it. One look at the net, one sense of that protective role, and he knew. Being a goaltender was his calling. By his teen years, Clint's passion and skill were more than apparent. He moved on to organized leagues, eventually landing with the Portland Winterhawks of the Western Hockey League. The WHL was notorious for its physical style, sometimes overshadowing pure finesse with sheer toughness. It's the kind of environment where a player either adapts quickly or gets left behind. If you're an undersized player, or, in Clint's case, a goalie not yet known for flamboyant saves, you'd better have mental fortitude in spades. Clint displayed that and more. He had quick reflexes, an aggressive style of coming out to challenge shooters, and a demeanor in net that told opponents, "You're not going to intimidate me." He was, in short, the consummate underdog who refused to shy away from confrontation. For scouts, that scrappiness marked him as someone who could not only survive, but perhaps thrive in the professional ranks. In 1981, the NHL came knocking in the form of the Quebec Nordiques. Although a relatively new addition to the NHL, they joined the league in the 1979 merger with the WHA. The Nordiques had a passionate fan base that was eager for playoff success. Clint stepped into a roster that already featured some big personalities and rising stars, though they tended to be overshadowed by their provincial rivals, the Montreal Canadiens. As a rookie goaltender, Malarchuk had to prove he belonged among these established pros. Each start felt like a test of his resilience. Every time he made a clutch, save or survived an onslaught from the league's best shooters, he inched closer to acceptance. Yet playing for the Nordiques was no easy ride. The team struggled to maintain consistency, and trade rumors swirled whenever someone went on a cold streak. Clint quietly pressed on, focusing on what he could control, his work ethic. Long after teammates left practice, he'd remain on the ice, working on lateral movements, controlling rebounds, and, most importantly, gathering the confidence needed to handle the pressure of an NHL game. Over time, fans took note of his unyielding grit. He wasn't the flashiest netminder in the league, but there was something about his determined expression, his willingness to absorb hits in the crease and bounce right back up, that endeared him to those who favored substance over style. By the time he moved on from Quebec, people around the league knew Clint Malarchuk was a battler who refused to let adversity define him. In 1987, Clint was traded to the Washington Capitals. The Capitals organization was in a transitional phase, trying to shed its reputation for early playoff exits. Clint's arrival coincided with a front office looking for stability and goal. Throughout the late 1980s, the Caps had a mixture of established veterans and young talent eager to push the team deeper into the postseason. For Clint, it was another fresh start, a new city, new teammates, and new fans to win over. He posted respectable numbers in Washington, often keeping the team in close games and earning a reputation as a dependable presence. Though he wasn't racking up Vezina Trophy votes, he was solid enough to maintain his place in the NHL. No small feat for a goaltender during an era when scoring was robust and physical intimidation was part of the normal game plan. Nevertheless, the nature of professional sports is change. Before the 1988-89 season concluded, Clint found himself donning the sweater of a new franchise, the Buffalo Sabres. If Washington was trying to find playoff success, Buffalo was a city starved for it. With rabid fans who filled the Memorial Auditorium, known affectionately as the Aud, the Sabres carried a rich history, but were still chasing that elusive Stanley Cup. Clint stepped into a lineup that demanded toughness and a no-excuses attitude. The city's blue-collar ethos meshed well with a goaltender who prided himself on grit. Fans soon dubbed him the Cowboy Goalie, a nod to his Western roots and his unflappable stance under siege. Which brings us to March 22nd, 1989, an evening that would forever mark Clint Malarchuk's life and legacy. The Sabres faced off against the St. Louis Blues, a matchup that promised to be competitive, but hardly apocalyptic. Buffalo Memorial Auditorium was buzzing, the stands packed with fans sporting jerseys and holding homemade signs. Kids begged their parents for cotton candy, while local sportscasters hyped the action. Then, in the second period, a chaotic scramble in front of Clint's crease changed everything. Blues forward Steve Tuttle got tangled up with a Buffalo defenseman, Uwe Krupp. Tuttle lost balance, flew into the air, and the blade of his skate cut across Malarchuk's neck. A horrific, almost cinematic image that no one in the building could have expected. Instantly, a fountain of blood gushed onto the ice, painting an almost surreal picture. Players on both teams recoiled as they realized the severity. The crowd fell deathly silent, many covering their mouths in shock or bursting into tears, convinced they had just witnessed a mortal injury. Up in the press box, announcers struggled for words, and cameramen didn't know whether to zoom in or switch away. With so many sports injuries, you assume a player might stand up after a grimace, maybe hobble off. This was something else entirely. A man bleeding profusely from a slashed jugular vein. Clint Malarchuk, staggering and aware he might die on the spot, clung to consciousness. He later said all he could think about was his mother watching at home and how he couldn't bear the thought of collapsing and bleeding out in front of her on live television. In that horrifying moment, Sabres trainer Jim Pizzutelli, a Vietnam War vet, raced onto the ice. With a presence of mind forged in combat, he thrust his hand into the open wound, pinching off the severed artery. Emergency responders rushed onto the rink, carefully loading Clint onto a stretcher, as Pizzutelli's grip prevented him from losing even more blood. The event was so traumatic that multiple fans fainted in the stands, and some players could scarcely watch. Within minutes, an ambulance peeled away from the Aud, sirens blazing, carrying a man whose life hung by a thread. The hush inside the arena spoke volumes. Everyone, from the fans to the players, from the concession stand workers to the commentators, was united in a stunned state. Had they just witnessed the end of Clint Malarchuk's life? At the hospital, doctors scrambled. Clint's pulse was weak. The blood loss was significant. Over 300 stitches were required to seal the wound and repair the damaged artery. Remarkably, he survived. In the immediate aftermath, local and national news aired ominous clips of the incident, often prefacing them with content warnings. Sports fans across North America, indeed the world, were confronted with a scene that was far from the usual highlight of a slapshot goal or a miraculous save. This was a near-death experience broadcast in real time. Yet, unbelievably, Malarchuk defied expectations by returning to the ice a mere 4 days after the accident. 2 weeks later, he was back in net for an actual NHL game. In hockey culture, which prizes toughness above almost everything else, this seemed like the ultimate testament to a warrior's spirit. Fans lauded him, teammates admired him, and the press wrote breathless articles about his iron will. Beneath the accolades, though, Clint was in turmoil, the shock of nearly dying in front of thousands, the relentless replays on television, the nightmares that must have replayed that moment in his mind. These lingered, unspoken. In the late 80s, mental health issues, especially PTSD, were seldom discussed openly. The pressure to walk it off, as if it were a minor injury, was pervasive. Clint tried, but the memory festered. He continued playing for Buffalo after 1989, though psychologically he was forever changed. He had nightmares, flashbacks, anxiety attacks, and all the while, he tried to maintain his status as a reliable netminder. Over the next few seasons, he gritted his teeth, stopped pucks, and attempted to project an image of unbreakable resolve. In total, he played 102 games for the Sabres across parts of 3 seasons. After his time in Buffalo, his NHL career wound down in 1992. By that point, Malarchuk had clocked 337 NHL games with 141 wins, 130 losses, 45 ties, 12 shutouts, and a .885 save percentage. Respectable stats for an era when goal scoring was robust, and intimidation was used to rattle netminders. Still fueled by the love of the game, he moved on to minor league clubs like the San Diego Gulls and the Las Vegas Thunder in the IHL, where he continued to exhibit that do-or-die spirit, throwing himself in front of pucks and body checks like there was nothing to lose. In those smaller venues, fans appreciated his dedication. He wasn't just collecting a paycheck, he was a man who lived to compete. But even as he performed on the ice, the psychological wounds from 1989 remained unhealed. Anxiety, depression, and night terrors gnawed at him. He tried to numb the pain. Alcohol became a coping mechanism. His personal life grew complicated, overshadowed by emotional exhaustion. In the mid to late 1990s, Malarchuk decided to transition from playing to coaching, sharing his expertise with younger goalies who yearned for an NHL shot. He served in various capacities with several organizations, including roles as a goaltending coach. On the surface, it looked like the next logical step for a seasoned veteran of the game. Pass down your knowledge, help up-and-comers avoid pitfalls, teach them the mental side of netminding. But the mental side was precisely where Clint was struggling most. He tried to bury his own trauma under a dedication to his new job. In these circles, he continued to be known as the cowboy goalie, a stoic presence who'd survived one of hockey's darkest moments. However, the internal storm did not subside. In October 2008, Clint made headlines again, this time for a nearly fatal gunshot wound at his ranch in Nevada. Early reports described it as a hunting accident, but the reality was even more heartbreaking. He had attempted to take his own life. This second brush with death was perhaps even more shocking to those who only knew him from his hockey persona. How could a man who once defied mortality on the ice reach such a point of despair? But for those who knew him more intimately, who had seen the shadows behind his eyes when the conversation turned to that fateful night in 1989, this was a desperate cry from someone who had never truly healed. Again, Clint survived, and in surviving, he found the determination to finally face his mental health struggles head-on. Diagnosed with PTSD, he entered therapy, battling not just the traumatic memories of his throat-slashing incident, but the deeper scars from a tumultuous upbringing and years of burying emotional pain under a facade of toughness. It was a formidable journey, but he began making progress. He stopped drinking, sought support, and eventually chose to speak openly about his experiences, breaking a code of silence that so many athletes adhere to in the name of appearing unbreakable. In 2014, Clint published a memoir, often referred to by 2 titles depending on the region: The Crazy Game in Canada and A Matter of Inches in the United States. Within those pages, he recounted his entire life, from his father's struggles with alcohol to that horrific night in Buffalo, from the endless nights of nightmares to the day he nearly ended it all with a firearm. The memoir became a sensation among hockey fans, who were accustomed to hearing about big hits and sensational plays. but not about the emotional cost of witnessing your own blood pour across an NHL rink. Through the book, Clint connected with people who had their own stories of PTSD, addiction, or suicidal thoughts. His inbox filled with letters and messages from fans who found hope in his raw honesty. As he bravely stepped into this new role as an advocate for mental health awareness, he also began speaking at conferences and community events across North America. Schools invited him to talk to student athletes. He fielded questions about everything from the physical aspects of netminding to the hidden realities of depression. Parents, grateful for his candor, thanked him for shining a light on issues their own children might face. Other NHL alumni started opening up about their personal struggles, be it chronic pain from repeated concussions or the mental strain of constant performance pressure. Hockey's culture was slowly, but unmistakably, shifting toward acknowledging that toughness isn't just about playing through injuries. It's about facing your own vulnerabilities. In parallel, Clint's infamous injury continued to influence hockey equipment and safety discussions. The sight of him bleeding profusely on that Buffalo ice was a driving force behind the push for mandatory neck guards, especially in youth leagues. While the NHL hasn't mandated them for all players to this day, many goaltenders now voluntarily wear reinforced neck protectors, mindful that one freak collision could end their careers or their lives. In interviews, Clint never demanded that hockey become soft. He loved the sport's inherent physicality, but he did argue that you could preserve the adrenaline-pumping action while still taking basic precautions to protect players from catastrophic accidents. After all, if his story could prevent even one more child from enduring a similar horror, perhaps that was reason enough. For many fans, Clint Malarchuk's name triggers a visceral memory of that gore-filled night in 1989. But over the years, it's become clear that the more impactful part of his story is what happened after. He displayed extraordinary resilience not just in returning to the ice so soon after the injury, but in his willingness to confront addiction, PTSD, and suicidal depression, conditions still misunderstood by many, especially in the macho world of professional sports. His journey from a small-town kid in Grand Prairie to the bright lights of the NHL, to the blood-soaked ice of Buffalo, to the brink of suicide, and back again, is a tale of survival on multiple fronts. It's a testament to how the mind, just like the body, can heal if given the right tools, the right support, and the right moment to confront what has long been repressed. So, was Clint Malarchuk's on-ice ordeal the most horrifying moment in NHL history, or even all of sports history? It might well be. Yet, ironically, that doesn't even capture the full extent of his story. Ultimately, it's not just about horror. It's about resilience and the willingness to break taboos around mental health. It's about acknowledging that we demand superhuman toughness from athletes while forgetting they remain human at their core. And it's about how a single freak accident can alter the course of a life, a league, and the perception of an entire sport. Feel free to share your own thoughts. Has the NHL done enough to prevent similar accidents? Should the league mandate neck guards and reinforce its mental health initiatives further? Is there still an ingrained culture that celebrates physical intimidation over safety? By keeping the conversation alive, we honor not just Clint Malarchuk's trauma, but his redemption, a testament that the hardest battles sometimes take place off the ice. Let us know what you think, and as always, stay curious about the stories lurking behind those highlight moments in sports. Because if Clint's journey teaches us anything, it's that beneath every helmet is a human being whose life can shift in a single heartbeat, for better or for worse.